There are some beautiful towns and cities across southern Alberta. Some are seeing populations dwindling while other ones are growing. Often they're places with friendly people and more affordable cost of living. And yet, they can also have similar challenges with drugs and crime. Joining me now to talk about it is Brent Feyter. He's the mayor of Fort Macleod, Alberta. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you for having us.
So Brent, a lot of people know Fort Macleod because you get some of these big name Hollywood pictures being shot in your town. Most recently, Ghostbusters. Tell me a bit about that.
Ghostbusters, yeah, that was a great event. A lot of activity, a lot of people in town, a lot of Main Street being interrupted, Empress Theater getting blown up. Yeah.
What? Oh no.
Yeah, it's so pretty amazing.
What kind of money does that bring to the town?
It's hard to put a number on it always because there's so many other contractors coming in and so on, but good activity. Yeah, and overall the community appreciated it. It's not easy, but for a small town, it's quite interrupting.
Did some people say, you know what, yeah, that disrupted my business. I couldn't get to work taking the usual route because some of the streets were blocked off. Did you get some complaints from the locals?
The site people are very good, actually. They work with the businesses. They try to coordinate as well as they can. So overall, they do their best to try to minimize the impact.
Now, there was a Kevin Costner movie shot just before Ghostbusters,
yeah, there
right?
was. Just, I think it was in May last year.
Did you get to meet Kevin Costner?
I did not.
Well, how
no,
come?
it was close. It was close.
Was
we had
it?
it all set up, but...
So he was in and then out.
But he made his rounds around town, visited the Empress Theater, the Fort Museum, and a few other places. So, oh yeah, he was definitely showed his face around, and that was appreciated.
Now, there's a special premiere showing, going back to Ghostbusters for just a moment, that's coming up this summer. Tell me a bit about
Yes,
that.
it's exciting. We got news that we are going to have a pre-screening event in Fort Macleod. Not 100% sure on the details yet, but it's going to be a big event. We're hoping to block off the main street and get a lot of people involved and have some, hopefully some of the actors are able to come out as well, but it's just before the New York or the Los Angeles event, so we might not be able to get them out.
Now, Brent, the latest Alberta budget that came out poses some challenges to some of the towns and the cities across the province here, and especially for, like I said, the municipalities. Yeah. I understand you had to lay off 2 peace officers?
Yes, so the rural crime initiative that the province came out with is a little bit before the budget was released, right? So that came out, and it's always been a discussion among rural communities because communities under 5,000 do not pay for policing with the RCMP. So it's always been a bit of a contentious item, like why don't we pay? So,
and what's the population of Fort Macleod now?
3,000. Okay. So most communities our size, well, yeah, it's appreciated we had the RCMP in our communities at no cost to our town. Mm-hmm. So this new proposal by the province was, well, we're going to charge more, but you're also going to get more. And so with the increased cost to the town that we would have to pay, our program, the community police officer program, came at risk.
Okay, and how much are you hoping to save? Was it 400 or 480,000?
Well, that's the total policing budget after 3 years that we would have had to pay. So we're hoping with the CPO program being eliminated, it's around 200, 250.
Now you're bringing in a bylaw officer instead?
Yeah, exactly. So strictly dealing with community bylaws, right? So CPOs had a little bit more permissions under the Act. And so that's why this is, we've seen this as better fitting for our community for sure.
But what about some of the rural crime and some of the issues when it comes to drugs and crime? And Fort Macleod, we'll see some of that as well, not just here in Lethbridge. Wouldn't CPOs help a lot more than a bylaw officer to keep people safe?
Oh, absolutely they would. But that has its limitations too. So it's not everything. Policing has been a challenge in crime in our community. Seems to be at a crossroads for good reasons, but also bad reasons. So it seems to be the end of the road for a lot of people that are looking for some criminal activity. So that's where our community has been challenged. And for example, our Citizens on Patrol group in Fort Macleod is very active.
Kind of like our watch program here in Lethbridge?
Yeah, exactly. They're out traveling the streets at night, keeping the eyes out for whatever activity there may be, working closely with the RCMP.
So what are some of the drug and crime issues that you're facing in Fort Macleod? Here we have opioid, meth problems. You know, there's a lot of crime as a result. People's bikes being stolen.
Yeah.
Vehicles being broken into. What about Fort Macleod?
Similar, very similar. It's kind of strange. I've talked to other mayors in our community in southern Alberta, and they wouldn't say they have the same amount of criminal activity as we might. We are heavily involved with the RCMP in watching and scanning and ensuring we are doing our best to reduce this amount of activity. In Fort Macleod, I think a lot of it has to do with its location. A lot of it's outside, people coming in. Some of it's quite organized, for sure.
What kinds of resources or programs are being used to help deal with this right now?
Well, like I said, the Citizens on Patrol is a big one.
And they're all volunteers, correct?
Correct, yes. So going out tonight, for example, I'm going out for a little ride, and starts at midnight. And
so if you see something, you call the RCMP right away?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Don't get out of the vehicle. Don't try to engage, but just be an observer. So, and a lot of community members are seeing the need and value in that, for sure.
What about the homeless issue? A lot of towns, a lot of cities are dealing with that across southern Alberta right now. How is Fort Macleod helping the homeless?
Well, that's a good question. Foothill Centre in Fort Macleod is probably a little known gem in our area of southern Alberta. It's a detox center, but it also works with the homeless. It's got shelter beds. For a small town, it's pretty amazing to have that bit of a resource. So they're able to house any homeless overnight, and so that's something we've really valued. We're also actively working to get more homeless or more housing for our community. It's hard to attract, and that's the biggest challenge, I would say, in rural communities, is harder to attract bigger investors into a small town when there is a big need.
Yeah, some people do like to move to smaller towns, though, because it's more affordable, right?
Yes.
Like a house here in Lethbridge for $350,
Yeah.
maybe going for, I don't know, maybe $200 or $250 in Fort
Correct,
Macleod.
yes.
And the property taxes are lower. The drive's not quite, I mean, it's not really that bad. It's 15, 20 minutes from anywhere in Lethbridge. But
No, it's always
Fort
longer
Macleod.
towards Fort Macleod than the other way.
Right. Okay. What else does Fort Macleod offer? Why else would people want to move to your town?
Well, I always look at the community as it's close to a lot of things, right? You're close to the mountains, you're close to Calgary Airport, you're close to Lethbridge. It's got a lot of resources in our town, a lot of great businesses, a lot of great jobs. The main street is vibrant.
Especially when they're shooting films, right?
Especially when they're shooting films. And last summer, in the last 2 years, they've had the Market on Main, which is a very active little event in our town. Usually, most evenings on a Thursday night in Fort Macleod, there's good 500 people that are wandering down Main Street. It's closed off, and there's good up to 40 merchants. So things like that make it a very good community feel, right?
Now let's talk about the unemployment rate. Lethbridge and Medicine Hat is around 4.6%, which is substantially lower than Calgary. I believe there's 7.2, Edmonton 7.7, Red Deer is 8.6%, right? Tied in heavily to the oil and gas sector. What about Fort Macleod?
I don't have a stat on it to say that we are what percentage, but overall it's got a lot of great industry, manufacturing, trucking, the auction market.
So agriculture is quite
yeah.
strong, right?
Some mechanic shops, welding shops. So overall it's a pretty active little community business-wise.
How else can you attract some business owners? You mentioned before it's a challenge, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Maybe the tax base, tax rate is a little more affordable? Like, how can you really attract those businesses to come to Fort Macleod?
A lot of it's building relationships, I would say, gaining a little bit of trust. A lot of times small towns aren't looked at as an opportunity. I would argue that for sure. There's opportunity. There's plenty of available lots and businesses that are active, right? So to attract, we're working on some incentives. The land is easier to develop. It's not as restrictive. So we try as best as we can as a council to encourage development, encourage conversations, and just think outside the box overall.
What about some of the tourist attractions as well?
Yeah.
That you have in Fort Macleod? Let's talk about some of those.
Yeah, so I think we all know Fort Macleod's named after the fort. It used to be the original location of a fort, and that's currently still active in museum in Fort Macleod, the Fort Museum. I'm also on the board for the Fort Museum, and it stays a very active little place. They try to get school students in and try to make a good picture of what it was like when the RCMP settled in Fort Macleod area.
Was it like the Northwest Mounted Police, I think, way back when, right?
Originally.
Now, outside of being the mayor of Fort Macleod, you also are a businessman.
Correct.
What are some of the businesses you're involved in?
So our two companies is Structural Truss and Forma Steel. And so they're regional companies that supply over Western Canada. So those are, I would say, good businesses to be in small communities because you don't need to sell as much in your community, but you can ship anywhere anyone else can. So.
Do you have any rivalries with any other towns, villages, or hamlets around Fort Macleod?
Oh, that's always a fun one. It's always good to chat with the other mayors to see where they're at. I wouldn't say we have any rivalries.
Come on, spill the beans. Nanton, all those people in Nanton.
Oh, that's Jen.
Right?
So, no,
but they got a great candy store.
They do.
And the Bomber Museum.
Oh, and the Bomber Museum.
Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a good place too.
It is.
Uh-huh.
Outside of attracting more business into Fort Macleod, and maybe sometimes budget cuts impacting the municipality as a whole, what other challenges do you face in your town?
I think it's the size of the community can be hard just to engage more with outside people. We don't always have the experience and the resources to be able to advocate and get projects moving. So I think that becomes hard. But overall, we do our best as a small town to, and even my position, for example, it's not full-time, so I'm not always out here in the news and doing great things, but so it can be limiting, but overall, we love our town. I've lived there all my life, and I don't know, I have no desire to be anywhere else. It's a great place
How many
to
people
be.
have left Calgary? That's my hometown, by the way. Said, you know what? I'm tired of living in a city of over 1 million people, 1.2, 1.3, whatever it's at. I'm going to Fort Macleod.
Yeah. No, a lot of people will look at Fort Macleod and the small communities as bedroom communities. Right. And lately I've argued that. And it's like, no, we're not a bedroom community. I think Lethbridge is a bedroom community for Fort Macleod. Oh. There's probably more people that live in Lethbridge and work in Fort Macleod than the other way around.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting.
Brent, you have a bit of a concern when it comes to new home construction in Fort Macleod. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so overall, Fort Macleod has experienced quite a bit of real estate sales in the last little while. Like our listings has dropped to lowest levels I've seen in many years. And largely due to new people moving into our community from wherever. But it becomes a little bit of a challenge. How do we attract builders that are interested in building smaller homes in smaller communities for our residents? So it's been a bit of a challenge. Some of it's building code related, I would say. Like there's a lot to keep up with building code changes and all the different requirements all the time. So in some ways it gets left up to the experts, the bigger builders, and it becomes hard to attract them into a smaller community. It's just too far a lot of times for them and too much work and too many unknowns.
So they're okay with Coaldale, Colhurst, maybe Nobleford, but Fort Macleod's a little too far from Lethbridge?
Yeah, that's what it appears, right? And it's a little too far from Calgary and it's a little too far. So in some ways that sends a good message that we're kind of a town on our own. But on the flip side, it becomes harder to attract more people to our community if there's not enough interest in building some smaller homes, at least starter homes to get started. And so we look forward to looking at ways that we can improve that for sure.
So outside of agriculture, what else does Fort Macleod offer? And some of the tourist attractions, what else is there?
Actually, it's probably more leaning towards manufacturing than it would be ag.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So overall, that's probably the bigger. We do also have the healthcare center and the seniors' homes. Those are big employers. The Bovary Exports, just east of us.
Do sometimes people say, I can't get into Chinook Regional Hospital, I'm going to Fort Macleod?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah?
Yeah, go to Fort Macleod instead of Lethbridge.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Brent Feyter, Mayor of Fort Macleod, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you joining me in studio today.
I so appreciate it. Thank you very much.